مکان اور بھی ہے ان قائل تھا سلامی کے جناب اور بھی ہے نام شبیر پہ بے ساختہ گریا ہونا عباد کل میں کہ یہ ایمان کا نشان ہے برچھیاں مار کے اکبر کو پکارے آدھا شہ سے پوچھو کوئی فرزند جوان اور بھی ہے بال کھولے ہوئے لاشے پہ جو آئی زہرا رے کھل گیا ہر پہ دمے نزا کے ماں اور بھی ہے کون قائل تھا سلامی کے جناب اور بھی ہے
نہیں وہ تو میں سے کہتا ہوں
محمد وآل محمد صلوات
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد.
Please recite Surah Fatiha for all of our marhumeen, the marhumeen of this family especially, and also those who have no one left to recite that Fatiha. Bismillah. Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبو القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم صلوات على محمد وعلى آله وسلم. First and foremost, we thank Allah for the opportunity to partake in Azad Imam Hussain once again for another year. I think it's important to do that at least one time during the 10 days because, you know, how many of us were here last year who did not get this opportunity again? It is truly one of the pearls that has been left by our 14 Masumeen to commemorate the sacrifice of Imam Hussain in the way that we do. There's a lot of beautiful cultural traditions, a lot of beautiful ways in which we share our time together, we learn together, we grieve together for one of the greatest moments in our history, one of the proudest moments of our history. Today, the line that I use, it's a very famous line. Many of you have heard it many times over and over again. We say it every single time we read Ziyarat al-Warid, especially when we do the Ziyarat of the Shuhada of Karbala. We give our respect and our salam to those individuals who laid down their lives with Imam Hussain salam, who are buried in Karbala alongside their master. And it's an interesting history behind it. This Ziyarat al-Warid was relayed to us by Safwan, who was one of the great companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And the interesting thing about Safwan is that he would accompany the Imam everywhere he went. So whether that was ziyarat of Imam Ali alayhi salam in Najaf, Safwan would accompany Imam Sadiq there. If it was ziyarat of Karbala, Safwan would accompany Imam Sadiq there, and every moment, in every way, he would take notes as how is Imam Sadiq approaching this situation? What etiquette is he using to approach the grave of Abu Abdullah? What etiquette is he using before to prepare himself mentally, spiritually, emotionally? And one of those great etiquettes is spending time at Ganja Shahida, right? Paying our respects to those individuals who did not have to be there, but chose to be there and support the Imam in that time. And one of the greatest things that we see from this part that was given to us by Safwan, this one line, فَيَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ مَعَكُمْ فَأَفُوزُ مَعَكُمْ. If only I had been there to share in your accomplishment. There's two beautiful things about that. Number one, first and foremost, the most obvious, is that we view that shahadat, we view that sacrifice as the accomplishment. By Allah, that is an accomplishment. You individuals that are buried in that grave, you did the one thing that we all aspire to do. You stood for truth, you stood for justice in a way that no one has in the history of mankind. And we call that shahadat, although there was disrespect. They were beheaded, the heads were marched around the cities on spears, although their bodies were trampled. We still call that an accomplishment. I think that speaks very much so to the honor that we have as Shia Muslims. The other part that stands out to me about that one line is that we say, yes, if I were with you, if only I could be there with you. If I were with you, I would partake. If only I were with you, I would partake. That we are separated by this barrier of time, where because we are born now and you were born then, you got to partake in this accomplishment. But if only I were there, I would also partake in that accomplishment. And I think it's a beautiful thing to say. It's such an amazing thing to be able to reflect upon a piece of history and think that, yes, oh, Abu Abdullah, you were on truth. History is witness that you were on truth, and if I were there, I would have loved to have that honor of giving my life for you. But I think it's also one of the scariest things that you can say. Because, yes, many of us, I'm sure, are at that level and have that confidence. But to say with 100% confidence that, yes, Abu Abdullah, if I were there with you, I would be part of this very special, very distinct group. That is a lot of confidence one has to have in themselves to say that, yes, I would be part of this group. And I think that aspect of the sacrifice of Karbala merits a bit more dissection. This is a very select group of individuals, only 72 to 100 maybe people that were present in this camp. Very select group of people. What were the circumstances that kind of led them to this position? And to do this, basically I want to sit and answer a couple of questions. Question number one being, who made up this army of Imam Hussain that we talk about? We speak about certain shuhada in great detail. Others maybe not so much. Sometimes we glaze over the importance of understanding the components, all the little pieces that went into comprising this army of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. In what ways was this group so special? Why do we continuously refer to these people as so special? Why do we revere them so much? Question number two is, what does it take psychologically to make a stand like that? To plant yourself against such a large opposition and to take such a stand, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of bravery. But emotionally, psychologically, what does that require from somebody? The third question would be, well, what was the historical aspect of this? So what were the historical conditions behind the formation of such an army? Why was there such a disconnect between such a group of thousands that were attacking a group of less than 100? What led to that even occurring? And then question number five is, what does all of this mean for us today? What does that sacrifice entail for us today? What does that example mean for us today? It's a bit different of a topic, I think, and I'm going to try to cover a decent amount, and I apologize if it does get a little bit confusing, but I'm happy to discuss any of the things that I talk about further. So inshallah, let's begin with a loud salawat. One of the things that stands out to me more than I think anything else in Karbala was the composition of the army of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And I didn't fully understand that until I went and I actually looked at some primary sources. I looked at some historical, historians and the documents that they have produced. And it's really remarkable. You see people from all different aspects of life. It's not just a group of Arab Muslims against another larger group of Arab Muslims. You have individuals from every single walk of life. If you are looking for representation in the army of Imam Hussain, more likely than not, you have some form of representation, whether it is ethnic representation, gender representation, whether it is spiritual representation, whatever you look for, you will find a story amongst those shuhada that resonates with you. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's more than what you can say for most historical conflict. Right? Typically it becomes political, typically it becomes ethnicity based or race based or geopolitically based, but this is truly a group of people that don't have a ton in common with each other. Yes, they have the fact that they're Muslim and the fact they have Islam, but they are all united for this one purpose of backing the Imam of their time. And that's something very strange. I think you only see that very select parts of our history. The other aspect of things is that, you know, if we look, there are biographies that are available, although some of them are limited, unfortunately, by the historical documents that we have and stuff like that. But you know, Ayatollah Shamsuddin has created this beautiful document called the Victors of Imam Hussain, where he goes and he gives a small biography of every individual. And some of the things that stood out, I think, are that there are so many people, again, from different walks of life. You know, the people that we generally talk about, sometimes we don't talk about them enough, right? You have people like Borer. Borer was a nobleman from Kufa. For all intents and purposes, he could have had a very comfortable life in Kufa. He didn't have to join Imam Hussain. Borer was one of the authorities on the Quran at the time. He was the one that if you needed a good Quranic recitation, you would go to him. If you wanted to learn how to read Quran, if you wanted to learn the meaning of the Quran, you would go to Borer. He was one of the most accomplished scholars, accomplished noblemen of Kufa. And he left all of that comfort behind because he saw that his Imam was struggling, his Imam was alone. You look at individuals like Habib ibn Malahir, right? He's an old man. By all, you know, for all intents and purposes, somebody that old is probably exempt from jihad. Somebody that old who's already seen that much history can say, look, I'm old, I've had my time, this is a young person's game, I don't need to be here. But he left his comfortable life behind, his family behind, and he snuck away to join his Imam because the son of Fatima needed him, in his own words. We have individuals like Hur, who literally at the last possible moment said, I cannot be part of this any longer. I see my calling on the other side, I need to switch. I see heaven and I see hell, and I'm making my decision today and now. And it's beautiful, the fact that we have this type of, you know, reversal in somebody's, you know, spiritual orientation completely just reversed. You have individuals like Wahab, who in the beginning wasn't even Muslim, right? He was a Christian, and he had just started this new chapter of life. He had just gotten married. He was just setting up things for the rest of his life. And he says, I'm going to leave all of this behind, and I'm going to go join Abu Abdullah. And even greater than that, his family encouraged. So you have all these groups of people that are coming together on this common denominator, basically, which is Imam Hussain alayhi Islam. How can we support this mission? But the beauty, the composition of this army is that everybody is so vastly different. And there's a story for each one of us, and each story has different lessons to take away. One of my personal favorites is the story of Zuhair ibn Qayn. Please, there's plenty of space up here. Can move on. So the story is Zuhair ibn Qayn. Interestingly enough, right, we kind of paint all these shuhada with one brush, right? They were all lovers of Ahlul Bayt. They were all people that were, you know, backing Imam Hussain since day one, with maybe the exception of Hur. That's like our only kind of, you know, perception of the shuhada of Karbala. Zuhair ibn Qayn is an interesting case because he was a supporter of Uthman, the third caliph, initially. And he had backed him all the way through. And he was, for all intents and purposes, on the sides of the enemies of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And that's the way he was. However, on one of the travels that he was taking, when Imam Hussain alayhi salam was traveling between Iraq and Mecca, they crossed paths. And just for a moment, their paths had intersected. And Zuhair did not want to show his face to Abu Abdullah. He was nervous. He was afraid. This is somebody whose father I openly was against. And now I have to see him face to face. I don't want to do that. And so he was kind of staying to himself. He was staying in his tent. And Imam Hussain alayhi salam, being the hospitable individual that he is, he sends a messenger to the tent of Zuhair. And the messenger says, look, Imam Hussain is here. He wants to meet with you. He knows that you're an old face. He wants to be reunited. He wants to see how you're doing. And Zuhair ibn al-Qayn is taken aback by this. Like, look, this is somebody who, again, I antagonized his father, and now he's saying he wants to meet with me. And for the moment, he's stuck. He's not sure what to do. And his wife tells him, look, the son of Fatima is calling you. Who are you to say no to that or to delay in that? Go and see what he is trying to tell you. So Zuhair goes to the tent of Imam Hussain, and Ayatollah Mutahhiri says this best. He says that Zuhair entered the tent with a pale face. He's an old man, and he comes out younger than he's ever looked, and his face is bright again. Mutahhiri says, I don't know what Hussein told this man. History does not know what Hussein told this man, but for whatever reason it was, there was a revolution in his heart, and from that moment he did not leave the side of Abu Abdullah until his death. From that moment, what he does, he goes to his tent, he tells his caravan, I need you to pack up my tent and I want you to move it right next to Hussein's tent. I want to be right there, right next to him. They move his tent and he sets up his accommodations next to Imam Hussain. He says, next, I want you to bring some people. I want to write down my will. I'm going to go die with Hussein. I want all my affairs to be in order. I want all my property to be split amongst my family Islamically so I can be ready to leave this world. Immediately, he sets up his affairs. And then he tells his wife, he says, look, I'm not going to be around much longer. I want you to go to your father's home. He will take care of you. He will look after you. But for me, I'm about to go and make this sacrifice with Hussein. I'm not coming back, and I want you to be prepared for that. Immediately after one conversation, this man's heart flips entirely. And whatever it is, Imam Hussain said, whatever effect that he had on this man's soul, for whatever reason, saved his hereafter. Because again, for all intents and purposes, this was somebody that had antagonized Amir al-Mu'mineen. It's an enemy of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And now he is amongst the greatest shuhada, the greatest companions of Karbala. Imam Hussain on the day of Ashura says, Zuhair, you are in charge of the right flank of my army. Habib ibn Madahir was in charge of the left flank, and Hazrat Abbas brought up the center with the alam. But Zuhair was in charge of the right side of Imam Hussein's army. And he says, I really, to give you all a homework assignment, I want you to go look at some of the things he says, because again, he's an older man. He's very eloquent in the way that he speaks. And he has a moment where he stands on Ashura before the fighting starts. On Ashura, he goes out into the battlefield and he stands amongst, right before the army, right in front of the army, and he says to them, he says, O people of Kufa, we are of the same religion and of the same city. He was a very well-known person in Kufa at that time. He says, look, we're the same religion, same city. I know the customs. I know where you're from. I grew up with some of you maybe. And he says, we did not start the fighting yet, but when that fighting starts, it will end in death. He says, it will end in death, and I am calling upon you to help the grandson of the Prophet. Abandon Yazid and his followers. You are not going to see anything good from Yazid. You see what he has done to the other companions. O people, the Ahlul Bayt and the Prophet deserve loyalty more than anyone else, and I warn you from killing one of the greatest people to ever walk this earth. To this speech, the response is that Shimr shoots an arrow at Zuhair, and it hits him. And Shimr says, silence, you talk too much, you need to stop talking. And Zuhair ibn al-Qayn says, I wasn't talking to you. My words will not reach your ears, you are an animal. I'm talking amongst those whose hearts may still change. And Shimr said, God is going to kill you and your friends within the hour. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn says, it doesn't matter what death comes to us. We know that we are on the right path. And that's where he leaves things. And eventually he does give his life for the sake of Islam. And it's a really beautiful story, because again, if those paths hadn't crossed, if Allah had not written for Imam Hussain to cross paths with this man, his hereafter would have been gone. And in that one moment, right, we see somebody that was from a completely different walk of life. He was a nobleman, rich guy. He had everything made for him, and he left all of that behind. And he said, no, my place is in Karbala with Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And I mean, we could go on and on about this for hours. You know, if you look at some of the narrations, they tell us that there were even as many as 16 freed slaves that were in the camp of Imam Hussain that were willing to give their lives for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They could have had anything. They could have gone anywhere. They could have started businesses, started families, settled down, traveled, or whatever. But they said, no freedom in this world is worth the freedom of the hereafter. No freedom in this world is worth the freedom of shahadat alongside Abu Abdullah.
لبيك يا حسين
لبيك
يا حسين
لبيك يا حسين
لبيك يا حسين
يا حيدري
صل على محمد وآل محمد. And again, like I said, we can go on and on about this, right? There were companions of Rasulullah, companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, sons of Amir al-Mu'mineen, whatever you want to do, however you want to call it. My homework assignment to all of you is I want you to go home and just look at one shuhada. Just try to understand what their life must have been like before Karbala. There's plenty of resources. Like I said, I'm happy to give you those resources, but just look at one shuhada of Karbala and try to imagine what it might have been like to be in their shoes, what it might have taken to stand alongside Imam Hussain in that way. Because truly, when I tell you that this is a special group of people, special is an underestimation. It is not giving them the credit that they deserve, but what it required in terms of courage and strength and sacrifice, we cannot even hope to understand, I think. So that's our first point, right? Who were these people? What was so special about their composition? The second point would be, how was that decision made? If you all please move up a little bit further. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صل على محمد وآل محمد. صل على محمد وآل محمد. So then that second point would be, how was this decision made? What does it take to make a decision like this? And unfortunately for you all, I'm going to go into science a little bit. I paid a good amount of money for my medical degree, so I will be using it. But there's this concept in psychology and social sciences that's called the bystander effect. It's pretty well studied. It's debated in some ways, but it's pretty well studied in the sense that there's good documentation to know that it exists, and there's good data to support it. But the idea is that if you're in a large group of people and something happens, somebody needs help, there's an emergency for whatever reason, the larger the group gets, the less likely it is for people to offer up their services and help. You would think it's the opposite, right? If you're in a group of 100 people and somebody falls down or gets hurt, you would think that all 100 of those folks are going to go and help out. But unfortunately, it's not necessarily the case. We see that sometimes as the group gets bigger, the responsibility is assumed to be shared amongst people. You think, no, there's probably a doctor or somebody here that can handle the situation. I don't need to help out. Or if somebody needs, help carrying groceries, there's probably somebody like stronger than me that can help out. Like I don't need to involve myself, right? And it's very easy for us to brush off that responsibility when there's more people to share it with. And we see that in terms of the Muslim Ummah as well, right? When there's one responsibility, oftentimes one person has to come forward and do it and take the brunt of it, and that's all, right? And for example, the funeral services, it's wajib kifaya, right? If one person does it, the entire ummah is okay. We're in the clear. But if nobody does it, then there's a problem, right? Because it fell on all of us and we are all liable for that. But the bystander effect is actually kind of interesting because when you think about how these things apply to Karbala, right? Where there's thousands and thousands of Muslims, right? The Islamic Empire has expanded so far. You would think that, there's probably more than 72 people that would want to lay down their lives for Imam Hussain. I'm surely more than 72 people understand that this is the grandson of Rasulullah, right? But unfortunately, it seems like a lot of this is human nature. They've observed it even in children, right? If you give children a problem while they're doing homework or whatever in a large group, they'll brush it off as, I'm just doing work and I shouldn't have to intervene in this. Something in our hardwiring tells us that, if it can easily be somebody else's problem if something happens and if we're in a group. Oftentimes we're shocked, right? Like nobody came to the help of Imam Hussain. Imam was saying, nobody came to his help. But in reality, this isn't surprising at all, unfortunately, right? We see that those mechanisms are all at play. And in some ways, we are hardwired to take the path of least resistance and say, look, this seems to be above my pay grade. It's more than I can handle. I don't want to deal with this. And somebody else can handle it. Somebody else can take that responsibility. So to me, that makes that sacrifice of those 72 even greater. Because they had to overcome this inertia of being a human being. They had to overcome kind of the laziness of human nature and really make a stand. And not only is it that, right? It's not just a bystander needs help. It's the grandson of the Holy Prophet needs help. And when they went back and did these studies for the bystander effect, they found that there were really 3 major criteria for like if people were likely to go and help out. One was the relationship between you and the person that needs help. If it's your brother or your wife or your son, you're more likely to offer help in that situation. And the other one was the type of cohesiveness you have as a group. If there's good group relations, you are more likely to go and help that person in your group that needs help. And then the third was how emergent is the situation. Like if it's something not so crazy, you don't have to help out. You feel less pressure. But if God forbid it's a life-threatening situation, people are more inclined to help out. And we see that Karbala kind of satisfies all three of these, right? This relationship to the person in need. All of those 72 felt an immense personal attachment that, yes, this is the Imam of my time. I cannot leave his side. We have a very beautiful story of Nafi, one of the companions of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. On the night of Ashura, Imam is patrolling the outside of the tents, trying to make sure nobody's snuck in the darkness to do harm to the women and the children. And Imam gets up from the tent and he goes to take a lap around. And he notices that Nafi also gets up and follows him. And Imam looks at him and says, "Look, Nafi, like you don't need to come with me. I'm just looking around. I'll be back shortly." And Nafi says, "Oh Abu Abdullah, I am looking out for you. If somebody comes in the darkness and attacks you, I need to be there." Imam takes Nafi's hand and says, "Look, Nafi, do you see those two hills?" He says, "Yes, Imam, I see those two hills." He says, "Nafi, there's nobody there. I know there's nobody guarding that area. If you want to leave, you can leave. I have forgiven you. Go live your life. Go sneak past those hills. Go sneak back to the city. You'll be fine. You can live the rest of your life." Nafi says, "Oh, Abu Abdullah, I refuse to do that. I am here till the very end. I will lay down my life for you." So that's an intense personal attachment that he had to the person in need. The second criteria that we talked about is the cohesiveness of a group, right? These were all individuals that saw themselves as, yes, I am the Shia of Imam Ali alayhi salam. I am going to protect the grandson of Rasulullah. All the war poetry that's read in the Maktab, they all start with, especially the ones that are said by the companions, obviously, they all start with, do you not know whose grandson this is? Do you not know whose house he grew up in? Do you not know who raised him from being young? And you're going to attack and kill this person. So they felt this immense cohesion between themselves that, yes, this is our group. No one can break our group. No one can touch Imam Hussain until we are all gone. And there are many instances where the companions have sworn this. Habib ibn Madahir and one of the other companions, they talked to one another. They said, no one will touch Hussain as long as we are alive. That is our pact. And the other one is, the other point that we mentioned is how emergent is the situation. What is more emergent than the grandson of the Holy Prophet being starved and being thirsty and being alone in Karbala? If that is not emergent enough to wake you up from your apathy, I don't know what is. And so that's what we're talking about. These are the individuals that were able to be at the side of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And if we think about human apathy more than anything else has been the enemy of Islam since the beginning. Right? If we think about Rasulullah's time, for instance, during Rasulullah's mission, his main goal was to shake us out of a state of apathy. The Ummah had distorted teachings that were comfortable with doing things that were not allowed. When Rasulullah came with the message of Tawheed, they said, no, our forefathers have been doing it this way, we're going to continue to do it this way. And that's not the case. Apathy has been our main enemy. Even in Karbala, we see that apathy, human apathy, not feeling something for your fellow human, is the main enemy of Islam. And that brings us to our next point. What was the historical context behind the formation of the army? We clearly have very impressive individuals. We clearly have a very dire situation that merits somebody coming to aid. But what were the historical contexts? Again, right, we still haven't answered why fully. There are thousands of Muslims and only 72 of them are willing to give their lives or at least protect or advocate for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. We know from our history that companions of all Imams were few and far between, right? We look at the later Imams like Imam Askari, Imam Jawad, they had very few companions. They would write to a lot of them because even associating yourself with the Imam of the time was enough to get you killed or tortured or thrown in prison. And our tradition itself, the Shia tradition, has never been one of a majority. We know that from the start, right? Majority numbers do not always mean that you're correct. In fact, more often than not, they mean that you're probably in the wrong. We can look at our history, like Nabi Nuh, for instance. He lived and preached for 950 years, and only a handful of people made it onto the ark. 950 years is an ulul azam prophet, not just some preacher or later figure. This is one of the greatest prophets. 950 years, only a handful of followers. We see Imam Ali alayhi salam, the famous stories, right, where after Rasulullah had passed away, the question was, well, are you going to go and reclaim what's rightfully yours? Are you going to take the Khilafah by force? And Imam Ali would stall people and say, no, it's not the right move. It's not the right move. At one point, it got to the point where people were saying, look, we need to do something. We need to do something. We need to install you in power. And Imam gets bayat from certain people, maybe 20 to 30 very staunch supporters. And he tells them, okay, fine. If you want to reclaim power by force and you will support me in it, I'm all for it. Let's do it. I want you to come tomorrow. I want you to all have your swords. I want you to dress in armor, dress for battle. And I want you to have your heads shaved as well. How many people showed up to the door of Amir al-Mu'mineen later? 4. 4 people showed up. Abu Dhar, Miqdad, Salman, and Ammar. Only 4. And he says, okay, fine. Maybe this is a one-off thing. Let's do it again tomorrow. And he does it again and again. Only those 4 show up, heads shaved, swords ready. Yes, Amir al-Mu'mineen, we are ready to back you. And we see that giving bayat to Amir al-Mu'mineen was very, very different than saying, look, I'm marking myself for battle. I'm shaving my head. They're going to know that I am part of your group. I have my sword in hand. I am ready to go to war with you. Those are 2 very, very different things. And these are all people that grew up knowing who Imam Ali alayhi salam is. It's not that they're detached by 1400 years of history. They know who this person is. They know he's the one that took the fort of Khaybar. They know he's the one that was the victor in Badr. They know he was the one that protected Rasulullah. They know all these things. And still, only 4 people were ready for battle. So we know that numbers, unfortunately, are not usually in our favor. When it comes to righteousness, it's hard to get numbers. Even when we organize things in the community, right? How difficult is it to get a good amount of people to show up? But does that mean that everybody else is an enemy of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Short answer, no, right? Because you can support the Imam, but you can maybe not be at the level of faith that it requires to go and defend him with your sword, right? We think about Karbala, there were a lot of individuals that, yes, they would have been present, but they were under house arrest. They were in prison. They were killed for their support of the 14 Ma'sumin. Right? Think about Mukhtar, one of our great examples. He was furious and so sad that, oh, Abu Abdullah, they had put me in prison. If I was not in prison, I would be amongst your team. And I missed out on something truly that I will not be able to make up again. And it's interesting, right? When we look at history, one of the greatest, one of the great books that I've been reading, opposing the Imam, they break down all these groups of people into basically 6 groups. There's 6 large groups of Muslims from the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, basically up until now. Group 1 would be the individuals that were outwardly hating Imam Ali, so the Nawasib, right? People that have hatred for Amir al-Mu'mineen, people that have hatred for the family of the Prophet. That would be like the Umayyads. That would be like the Khawarij, for instance. There's other political factions that showed up. And it turns out that, supporting Imam Ali alayhi salam is a bit of a spectrum, right? These are the people that are all the way on one side. They hate Amir al-Mu'mineen. They don't want anything to do with him. Group 2 would be individuals that said, yes, the Imam is unique, but he doesn't deserve Khilafah. He, was a companion of Rasulullah, but all companions are equal. We don't agree with that, obviously, because we know for a fact that some people were created differently than others. But that group 2, like folks like Ibn Taymiyyah and his kind of contemporaries, they said, no, all companions are exactly equal. We won't have any discussion about differences between them. We won't hear anything, basically. They're all equal. We don't want to hear anything, because when you read history that way, it makes things difficult, but it's still their opinion. Group 3 was individuals that said no tafdeel of the Imam. So basically, that the Khilafah was, na'udhu billah, given in rank order, that Khalifa number 1 was greater than 2, was greater than 3, was na'udhu billah greater than 4. Again, we know that that's not the case, right? So group 5 or group 4 would be no imamah, but the Imam is excellent. Like, he was the one that deserved to be the Imam of the time after. He was one that deserved Khilafah, but he's not Imam. We will not give him, the respect of saying that he has ilm al-ghayb or whatever the case might be. Group 5 would be us, right? We think that, yes, he is the righteous successor of Rasulullah. He is given ilm al-ghayb by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he's not a deity. And then group 6 would be on the other side. They think he's a deity. So long story short, there's all these different groups of people that basically have a different type of affinity for Amir al-Mu'mineen, with one side being people that hate Imam Ali alayhi salam, and the other side being people that love him too much. They deify him, and that takes you out of the fold of Islam, right? But between that, there's still a decent amount of argument between the other groups, right? And just like we have debate today, they had debate back then too. Like it wasn't just a group of enemies and supporters of Amir al-Mu'mineen. There was a very diverse group of opinion between all of these individuals. And it was a spectrum, right? A spectrum of love and hate for Imam Ali alayhi salam. You kind of put people in different spots depending on what their beliefs were. And the other aspect of that is like there wasn't really like good news media back then. There wasn't a good way to like kind of spread messages and things like that. So again, these pockets of individuals existed. One of those pockets, and one of the more problematic pockets, was Sham. Sham was strategically located. Basically, it was this kind of overlap of a lot of cultures. It was very easy for Banu Umayyah, who were the main enemies of Islam at that time, to take a foothold there. That was where Muawiyah basically did all of his activities from, where his headquarters were in Sham. And because they were so detached from the area, because there was, again, no centralized media, no way to get good word out there, Muawiyah was a cunning propagandist. He would plant rumors, he would plant all these different practices that would instill amongst the people a hatred for Imam Ali alayhi salam. And we're no strangers to that, right? We've heard many times, right? The cursing of Amir al-Mu'mineen during the Friday prayers had become institutionalized because of Muawiyah. We know that during his time he had made it spread all these rumors, made it very easy to hate the Imam, to the point where Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he was shaheed, when word got to Sham, there were certain people in Sham that said, wait, what do you mean? Imam Ali was in a mosque? Na'udhu billah, he was killed in sujood. I thought he didn't pray. That was the level of control that he had over the society. Those ideas leach over into other areas. So you have this kind of diverse opinion, many, many thousands of people, and then you have somebody actively trying to spread hatred for the Ahlul Bayt in one spot. So it creates a perfect storm of factors where most people are either probably indifferent, or they outright hate Imam Ali, or they outright hate his family to at least some degree. And then we can even see that later on, right? In Karbala, one of the famous lines when Imam Hussain asks, why are you doing this to me? Why have you formed this army to come against me? The enemies say, "Bughdun li abik," out of hatred for your father. Because at the end of the day, they were a product of that society, of that environment that had created such hatred for Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali, yes, he did everything right. But at the end of the day, there was no house in Mecca at one point that wasn't untouched by Dhul-Fiqar, right? A lot of these individuals had family members, or they were descendants of people that were antagonists of Islam. So again, you have all these factors that are sort of setting up society as a whole to reject the family of the Prophet, to ostracize the family of the Prophet. And that to me makes it more amazing. All society where it's so easy to hate the family of the Prophet. And to me, being part of that group of the 72, it's not just righteousness, it's conviction. It's not just that I know these people are right and I have faith. It is, there is nobody that's right aside from these people. If I stick with this family, if I stick with this group of people, I know I'm secure in this world and in the Akhirah. So the society in which that 72 shuhada was formed, this group of individuals, had a lot of issues. And again, to declare your faith in the way that they did, to stand against people, not just take a righteous stand, not just take a stand against tyranny, a stand where you know what's going to happen to you. That to me is amazing. I don't think we speak to that depth of the type of choice that needed to be made at that time. It truly is amazing. Salawat ala Muhammad. And that to me is when Abu Abdullah is telling people on the 9th of Muharram, the night of Ashura, when he is telling people that no, neither my father nor my grandfather had companions like these. That is what he is saying. He is saying not only are these individuals special, not only have they navigated a corrupt society, not only have they put away the desires of this world and suppressed their own nafs to be with me, they are giving everything that they have in my path. And that to me means more than the companionship of those individuals who are not that devoted. So, So that leads me to my final point. What does that mean for us? We've kind of dissected the circumstances around those 72 individuals taking that stand with Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But what does that mean for us? We're reading history 1400 years later. We're still commemorating things, yes. But what does it mean in terms of our service to the Imam of our time? Personally, I think that we are in a very similar situation. We are a minority of a minority. We are in a situation where we don't have much political power or much pull, and we are in a situation where oppressors of this world have very much taken over. They have a lot of strength, and sometimes it feels suffocating. The things that people are able to do, the powerlessness that we have. But I think that these 72 shuhada, they have given us a good template to follow, a good example to follow. Is that yes, we might be in the minority, but we also can make that choice between apathy or being an empathetic, emotionally intelligent Muslim. It's very easy to do your wajibat or do whatever you need to, call yourself a Muslim, and that's that. It's much more difficult to live the way that they lived, and to live Karbala and to live Ashura the way they did. And I'm not saying that I am some sort of expert in this either. But I think, if anything, if we walk away with anything during this 10 days, I think it's that. It's how can we look at those individuals and how can we implement at least some of that conviction into our lives? When the Imam reappears, it's going to be very easy for us to just go on with our lives and say, look, Imam, you and your soldiers have got this situation. You and your government have got this situation. I'm going to go and deal with my things. I have my work, I have my school, I have my obligations, and that's that. I'll see you when I see you. It's very easy to do that. But the Imam is requiring us to be a little bit more than that. The Imam is requiring us to be a little bit better than that. And I think, again, I don't mean to say this from a place of arrogance or anything like that, but I think, genuinely speaking, if the Imam is waiting on us, we need to look at the companions that his grandfather had and try to emulate them as best as possible so we can be ready for him. Have that complete conviction. Imam wants us to know our religion beyond just the easy stuff, right? Not just to pray and do majlis and things like that, but he wants us to understand when Islamic principles are being utilized appropriately and when the name of Islamic principles is being used for other purposes. We have to be able to identify our faith before somebody else hijacks it for their own. Imam wants us to go and be the leaders of society, whatever it is that you're going to do. If you're a computer programmer, be the best computer programmer you can possibly be. If you're able to teach somebody that computer programming, if you're able to support somebody through their education, then do that. If you are to be a doctor for the sake of the Imam of your time. Say that, look, I am going into this world and I am aiming to heal a little bit for the sake of your family. I will mentor people, I will pull people along with me, but I am doing it for the sake of the Imam of my time. If you're If you're a teacher, teach people for the sake of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. We have such a beautiful template that's been set forth for us. And I think we need to look at, yes, definitely the Ma'sumin, the Banu Hashim, but look at those individuals who left everything they had behind, that everything they had in this world was for the Imam. Without the Imam, it meant nothing. That to me is the takeaway from those 72 and my readings of those 72 shuhada. Next time we say this part of Ziyarat al-Waritha, this part of the Ziyarat al-Shuhada Karbala, Ya laytani kuntu ma'akum fafudu ma'akum, let it be from a place of thoughtfulness, from a place of us renewing our allegiance to the Imam of our time, saying that, oh Imam, we were not able to be there then, but we are going to lay the groundwork for you when you come. Let it be a dua, let it truly be something that comes from our hearts, inshallah. One of the if we turn to the night of Ashur, Imam Hussain alayhi salam gathers all of his companions in that tent, and he does something again that we touched on, but he does something very strange. He begins his sermon by praising Allah. He says, all praise is for Allah. The best of praises and all thanks to be for Him in comfort and in distress. O Allah, all praises for you who have granted us prophethood. You have taught us the Quran. You have granted us a profound understanding of religion. You have enabled us to hear, to see, to reflect, and you have made us amongst those that worship one Lord. he's beginning by reminding us all of our values, of our shared values. He says, I do not know of any companions more loyal and better than mine, and no family members more truthful and confident than mine. Hence may Allah grant all of you the best of rewards. And my grandfather, the Prophet of Allah, has indeed told me that I would be called to a place in Iraq, and I would land in a place called Karbala, and I would be martyred here, and that time is quickly approaching. He says, beware, I believe the enemies will start that war tomorrow. I have absolved all of you of your obligations so that you may leave with no obligation to me. He says, if you feel uncomfortable, go into the tents and take one of my family members and leave. Go and save them with you. Go back to the gates of your city so that you may tell the people, yes, I saved one of the family of Imam Hussain, so that you may bear witness on the day of judgment that I saved one of my family members. But at that point, the individuals, once that a lamp is extinguished, when Imam Hussain extinguishes a lamp and tells people to go, to leave him, he puts the lamp back on and he sees that no one has moved from their spot. He sees the likes of individuals like Hazrat Abbas say, oh Mawla, we are here, Labbaik Ya Hussain, we are not leaving your side. He sees the likes of Zuhair ibn Qayn say, oh my master, if Allah were to give me 1,000 lives, and in each life I was killed and cut to pieces and brought back, I would do that 1,000 times over for you, Ya Aba Abdullah. We see individuals like Nafi, like I told you before, how they were unwilling to move in any way, shape, or form. But if you want to see conviction in action, if you want to see the bravery of Imam Ali alayhi salam manifested in Karbala, if you want to see the steadfastness of Ad Muhammad, if you want to see the steadfastness of the Ma'sumeen in human form, look no further than Hazrat Abbas. And this was an individual that grew up so close to these personalities, that grew up in service to these personalities. That is the shining example of how to support the Ma'sumeen and the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Zain al-Abidin says that if you only knew the status of my uncle Abbas amongst the Shuhada, and how he is viewed by Allah on the Day of Judgment, the status that he will be given. And that point, when Hazrat Abbas was born, he would not open his eyes until he was given to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They brought Imam Hussain and they put Abbas in his arms, and at that point, Imam Hussain opened his eyes. And there was another story where Imam Ali alayhi salam was holding Abbas shortly after he was born. He was a newborn baby. And Imam Ali alayhi salam picked up Abbas's hands and began to kiss them. Al-Baneen was sitting next to him and said, oh my husband, what are you doing? Why are you kissing his hands? Why are you crying? Imam Ali alayhi salam says, oh my wife, there will come a time where these hands are cut off. There will come a time where this man, this child will grow up and he will lose his life protecting his brother Hussein. On the 9th, Abbas was there. On the 9th, Abbas was ready to give his life. Perhaps on that night, he sat in front of his tent sharpening his sword, thinking, oh Allah, tomorrow is the day I will give my life for Hussein. Tomorrow is the day everybody has been preparing me for. Tomorrow is the day I get to reach this honor of Shahada. But on that day, Abbas picks up the bodies of each of the Shahada, brings them back to the camp with Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And there comes a point where he thinks, yes, this is the time I will go and give my life. He goes to Imam Hussain and says, oh my master, it is time. It is time for me to go and give my life. As Imam Hussain says, Abbas, how can I let you go, knowing that you're the standard of Alamdar of my army? How can I let you leave? Who is going to lead my troops into battle? Abbas says, oh Mawla, with all due respect, but look at the troops that we brought back from the battlefield. What troops are left for me to lead into battle? It is my time. Imam Hussain says, oh Abbas, I can't give you permission right now. Come back later. Come back later. Your brother cannot give you permission to leave. Abbas leaves, and on his way out from Imam Hussein's tent, he sees that there's a small girl outside holding a mushk that has dried up. He picks up Sakina in his arms. He picks the mushk up in another arm. Sakina says, oh my uncle, anytime we have asked you for something, you have gotten it for us. I'm asking you now for some water. Abbas begins to cry and he says, look, if I had water for you, I would give it immediately. Give me your mushk. Maybe your father will let me go and get water for the children of this camp. Abbas goes to Imam Hussain again and he says, oh my master, if you're not going to let me go and fight, at least let me go and bring water back for the children. Imam Hussain gives Abbas permission. Abbas gets on his horse and he rides out into the battlefield. This is the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The enemies scatter. They do not want to face him. Abbas gets to the river with ease. He gets off of his horse. He fills the mushk up and he puts it onto his horse. Then he goes and he picks up some water in his hands and he begins to bring it toward his face and then he throws it back into the water. He says, Ya nafs, and when Hussein is thirsty, you will not taste water. He gets back onto his horse. He begins to ride back to the camp of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. The enemies see that there's water in the hands of Abbas. They think if it gets back to the camp of Imam Hussain, it's over for us. Somebody comes from behind and attacks Abbas's right arm. They cut off his right arm. Abbas shields the mushk with his body. And he says, if you cut off my right arm, I will fight you with my left. And he begins to fight the enemy with his left arm. Then somebody comes and attacks his left arm and cuts the left arm off. Abbas leans over the mushk and tries to protect it. They rain arrows down on Abbas. One pierces his eye. One pierces the mushk and the water begins to spill to the ground. It's at this point Abbas turns the horse around and he says, there's no point in going back anymore. Abbas goes back out toward the river. Someone comes from behind and hits him with the head with a mace. Abbas falls to the ground. Now, normally when you fall, to protect yourself, you put your hands out in front of you. Abbas falls to the ground. Bani laments this. She says, my poor son, he fell to the ground in Karbala. Abbas lands to the ground. Imam Hussain sees that Abbas has fallen. He yells out, he says, oh Abbas, my back is broken after you. How will I go on? He eventually gets to the body of Abbas and puts Abbas's head in his lap. Abbas moves his head and puts it back onto the ground. Imam Hussain says, Abbas, what are you doing? And then Abbas says, I have 3 requests for you, Mullah. My first request is that there's an arrow that's gone into one eye and it's bled into the other eye. I can't see you. The first thing I saw in this world was you. I want to be the last thing that I see. Imam Hussain cleans Abbas's eye. Abbas is able to do ziyarat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam's face. The second request I have for you, Mawla, he says that please don't bring my body back to the camp. Anytime that Sakina has asked me for something, I've been able to go back and I've been able to get it for her. This time I was unsuccessful and I don't want her to see me like this. And then he also says, oh my master, my last request is that don't put my head in your lap. Imam Hussain says, why? Abbas says, in this last moment, I am receiving comfort from you. You are here to hold my head in your lap. You are here to see me and see me as I leave this world. Oh, my master, who will do that for you when the time comes? Imam Hussain says, oh, Abbas, you have 3 requests for me. I have 1 request for you. Your entire life you've gone by calling me your master, your Mawla. Please, this one time, call me your brother. Abbas says, oh, my brother, please accept my last salam. Ala la'natullahi ila qawm al-zalimeen. Matime Hussain.
زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا انتہا یہ ہے کہ بہتا ہوا دریا دریا ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا آ کے ساحل پہ جو صفائے سکینہ 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 ٹھہرا مجھے ساکت ہوئی بہتا ہوا دریا دریا ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا اے علمدار تیری جرأت و ہمت کے نثار 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 علمدار تیری جرأت و ہمت کے نثار دور دریا سے تیرے جسم کا سایہ سایہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا کس طرح اب دل بیتاب کو بہلائے ماں 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 دل بیتاب کو بہلائے ماں بہت خالی ہے نظر آتا ہے جھولا جھولا ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا جب سکینہ کو رہے شام میں گرتے دیکھا 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 سکینہ کو رہے شام میں گرتے دیکھا ہر آواز اس پہ سرے شاہ وہ نیزا نیزا ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا کربلا کی ہے زمین اور فرشتوں کی زمین 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 سجدائے دو جہاں شاہ کا روضہ روضہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ زمانہ ٹھہرا دے کر ہے بتیابا زمانہ
زمانہ ٹھہرا
حسین حسین حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
حسین
بعد قتل شاہ انام غیر غربت کی وہ شام
بعد قتل شاہ انام غیر غربت کی وہ شام
رش میں پڑا ہے تشنا کام ہو جائے غم سے نہ تمام
آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام
زخم لہو برساتا ہے
زخم لہو برساتا ہے
زخم لہو برساتا ہے
زخم لہو برساتا ہے
دل ہے کہ چل کا آتا ہے
زخم لہو برساتا ہے
دل ہے کہ چل کا
آتا ہے
در کھاتا جاتا ہے لمحہ لمحہ دام بدام
آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام
بغض و حسد سے کینوں سے
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 لوٹتے ہوئے سینوں سے
بغض و حسد سے کینوں سے لوٹتے ہوئے کینوں سے
کلمہ کو بے دینوں سے چلتا ہوا بازار شام
آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام
کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع
کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع
کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع
کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع
اور پیمبر کا کنبہ
کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع اور پیغمبر کا کنبہ
اے بدر ننگے ہے کھڑا آج سرے دربار شام
آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام
میرا باپ یہ لیلا ہے
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 یہ کلثوم یہ کبرا ہے
میرا باپ یہ لیلا ہے یہ کلثوم یہ لیلا ہے
یہ معصوم سکینہ ہے اور ہے زینب اس کا
بیمار اے میرا بیمار
السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين. السلام عليك يا رحمة للعالمين. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا محمد الحسن بن علي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك. السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأختك. السلام عليك وعلى كل مستشهدين معك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم جميعا شهداء كربلاء وأسيران كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك أئمة الهدى من ذرية الحسين عليهم السلام، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك، الله تعالى مخرجك، وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته. حاضری ہوگی اس میں آپ لوگ شرکت کیجیے. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم.
اللهم كل وليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا